The morning of Friday, December 14th, 2012 started out normal. For Katrin Roig, being a first-grade teacher at Sandy Hook was not just a job, it was her passion. She enjoyed teaching her 15 students. She had the patience to explain the classic tasks of a school, and she enjoyed even more giving them lessons that would serve them forever. She was shaping the voices of tomorrow. Katrin Roig had started the day with that same premise until she heard the shots, then a growing alarm woke up inside her. She had to get to safety, looking at her students and the surroundings. The windows were too narrow for even the shortest children to slip through, plus those windows faced the place where the shots were coming from. Escaping through the hallway also seemed impossible. The threat could suddenly appear and intercept them. Finally, Caitlin looked towards the classroom bathroom. It had been built for only one person to enter, but there was no other option. Stealthily, she gathered the children and instructed them to enter the compartment. Soon they were piled up and squeezed together, but it was still possible to keep them hidden and protected from whatever was lurking outside. Despite the cramped space, the teacher also crammed into the tiny bathroom. She told them, "Know that I love you all very much." For a second, she wondered if those words would be the last thing those young people would hear. A knot formed in her stomach when new shots rang out, this time closer. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. How would you react if your life and your students' lives depended on a single decision in a matter of seconds? Could the Sandy Hook tragedy have been avoided? How did a shy and withdrawn child end up being responsible for one of the most terrifying massacres in history? What happened that morning in 2012, and how did it become a day that marked the whole United States? School massacres are a disease that plagues the modern world. The most resonant cases have their epicenter in the United States, and some have sadly become infamous. These are events that can even happen in places like Newton, a Connecticut town of 28,000 inhabitants where nothing bad ever happened. We're talking about a town that was brimming with life thanks to 700 young students, many growing businesses, and a blind faith in the future. Basically a dream town that stopped being one. December 14th, 2012, the day the Sandy Hook massacre occurred. To talk about the massacre, first it's essential to know its perpetrator. Adam Peter Lanza was born on April 22, 1992 in Kingston, New Hampshire. He was raised in a well-off family. But financial stability is not the same as emotional stability. It was precisely during his 4 years at Sandy Hook Elementary where it became clear that Adam was not an ordinary person. Teachers and classmates noticed that he was disturbed by noises and movements. He also got nervous having to change classrooms in the same day. Due to his unsociable and closed-off behavior, his parents took him to a psychiatrist as his condition seemed untreatable. At 13 years old, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. The medications didn't work as they caused him dizziness and disorientation. Even though they had taken him to a therapist, Adam never received much support from his family. Peter, the father, was dedicated to his work. Ryan, the older brother, preferred to be out of the house, so he spent more time with Nancy, the mother. She was a fanatic of firearms and had permission to carry them. In fact, she used to go with her children to a shooting range to practice and also to events organized by the National Rifle Association. The young man from the clan learned to use pistols and shotguns at an early age. The explosive cocktail was already served. Adam had a difficult time at school. He could be a brilliant and studious student, but his grumpy and antisocial character overshadowed his virtues. Some classmates understood him while others ridiculed him. He had difficulty finishing primary school, attending multiple schools in the process. For high school, he entered Newton High School, where the outlook became more positive for a while. In 2007, he was put on the honor roll. However, he was still unable to make friends and hormonal changes exacerbated his health problems. He gradually stopped attending class until he fully dropped out. Around the same time, his family fell apart. His parents could no longer live together, so in 2009 they ended up divorcing. Peter left home and a legal agreement allowed Nancy to keep the house. She had a financial situation that allowed her to live comfortably. Soon after, Ryan got a job and also left. And so it was that Adam was left alone with his mother, who began to become even more protective. Even though the area had constant surveillance, this attitude did not unsettle those close to her who valued her fighting spirit. Meanwhile, Adam withdrew further into isolation. In 2006, he stopped receiving medical care. In that context, he remained aware of the arsenal that had accumulated in his house. Little by little, that was the germ of the new obsessions he began to develop, obsessions related to violence and blood. In the 2 years prior to the massacre, Adam spent more and more time in his room. He didn't study or work and had covered the window with black garbage bags to block out the sunlight. Contact with his mother became limited to the point that they began to communicate by email, even though they were both in the same house. Adam turned his room into a bunker, and within those dimly lit four walls, he spent hours playing video games like World of Warcraft. However, he found a dark hobby. Investigating school massacres, he compiled material on the web about killings throughout history and in different parts of the world. He focused on the 1999 Columbine Massacre and another at Northern Illinois University in 2008. He learned the mechanics of the shootings and empathized with the attackers. He thought they were just trying to save the children from the harmful influence of adults. Although he remained isolated, Adam constantly used internet forums to socialize. There he could meet people who seemed to share the same morbid concerns. Through this means, in 2010 he established a relationship with a user who never revealed her real name. She later informed the Federal Bureau of Investigation that the young man revealed his deepest obsessions to her, and how he was convinced that mass murders were the symptom of a shattered society. That woman also pointed out that despite his pessimistic view of the world and his tendency towards depression, Adam was an intelligent young man. In addition, she revealed that the boy slept 12 hours and was not attracted to food, so he had developed anorexia. Finally, and always, according to this woman, Adam had a sinister view on child abuse. He believed that relationships between adults and children could be beneficial for both. But Adam's was not just reflections and words, he was ready to use his taste for weapons. In a crusade that no one could anticipate, Adam set a day for his homicidal raid. December 14th, would they reveal his identity to the world? He wanted his name to become famous, and of course he would achieve it, but in the worst way. Past 9 in the morning, Adam Lanza woke up, dressed in black, and went to the room where the weapons were stored. He separated a Bushmaster model XM15E2S, 2 pistols, a semi-automatic Ishmael Saiga 12 shotgun. He also stocked up on ammunition for each one. Finally, he put on a green utility vest. He grabbed a Savage Mark II rifle, 22 caliber, and went to his mother's bedroom. Days before, Nancy had told the young man that she was thinking of moving to another town. She thought that maybe that would help Adam, but that would never happen. Her youngest son burst into her room and shot her 4 times in the head. The woman's body lay slain on the double bed. Without wasting time, Lanza went for the weapons he had set aside and loaded them into his mother's car. Then he got behind the wheel and drove to his next target, Sandy Hook Elementary. It was just 8 kilometers away and he crossed them without attracting attention. He parked near the establishment and a while later he set off on foot. Back then, the school had a novel security system. Anyone who wanted to enter first had to ring a bell while being identified by a camera. That didn't stop Lanza, who put yellow plugs in his ears and used the Bushmaster to shatter the glass panel next to the main doors. The first shots alerted students and teachers thanks to the school's loudspeakers, which were being used for routine announcements. Among those who heard the detonations was Katrin Reich. And that's how our story comes back to the beginning. It was already past 9:35 when Adam entered Sandy Hook School. In the immediate hallway, Dawn Hushburn, the principal of the institution, and school psychologist Mary Sherlock appeared, followed by assistant principal Natalie Hammond. They were in the middle of a meeting when they heard the noises and left the main office to see what was happening. According to the testimony of a survivor, they managed to shout, "Shooter, be careful." Lanza killed Hushburn and Sherlock. Hammond was injured. But the attacker didn't stop to finish her off and kept walking through the building. He didn't stop for long either. In the main office, in a corner, a school board member who had attended the meeting was hiding. As we mentioned, these initial spear shots alerted the teachers, students, and other school staff members. In the library, employees Yvonne Zeck and Marianne Jacob hid 18 students in an area used for simulation alerts and in the basement. For their part, nurse Sarah Cox and secretary Barbara Halstead managed to take refuge in a first aid closet. Speaking in whispers, they managed to use their cell phones to call 911. Janitor Rick Thorne tried to move quickly to lock any of the classrooms he had nearby. Meanwhile, Lanza continued his sinister tour of Sandy Hook, operating according to the guidelines of his plan, and they broke into a first-grade classroom where he found Laureen Rousseau, a substitute teacher who was trying to protect 16 students. Rachel Davino was also there, an assistant teacher who had been working since just 2 weeks at the school. Lanza opened fire on them. 14 children died instantly, while one was badly injured. Only one girl managed to hide in time to avoid the impacts. Unstoppable, Lanza left that class and went into another classroom. Inside was Victoria Soto, who had managed to get her students to hide in the bathroom, in the closet, and under the desks. The aggressor discovered 4 of the semi-hidden boys and wanted to shoot them. Soto stepped in the middle to prevent it, but it was in vain. Lanza killed all 5 of them. In that same classroom was Mary Murphy, an assistant teacher who took care of children with disabilities. She focused on protecting one student, in particular Dylan Hockley. The killer exterminated both of them. The proliferation of gunshots, screams, and death terrified the rest of the school. Caitlin and other teachers had taken urgent measures to shield their students, but anyone could be next. That's when Caitlin heard footsteps in the hallway. She asked her students to remain silent and wait. The footsteps stopped by the door, but they kept going, as the teacher said later. A piece of black paper covered the glass on the door, so the killer might have thought the classroom was empty. Moments later, Lanza stopped in front of the music room. Inside, teacher Mayrose Kristofic had just hidden her 4th grade students in a closet. The murderer banged on the door and yelled to be let in. Neither the woman nor the kids made a sound. Lanza didn't insist and continued moving through the school. The young man was about to continue with the massacre when he heard the arrival of the officers. First arrived the Newton police, who remained on the street. The Connecticut police arrived at 9:46. They had the necessary equipment for these situations, including trained dogs. Moments later, a helicopter was already hovering over the building. Lanza had planned for this situation. He went to classroom 10, drew a Glock 20 short frame and imitated the example of many of the school massacre killers with whom he identified. At 9:40, he shot himself in the front of the head. He was 20 years old. The body was found by officers who entered a few minutes later. Without wasting time, the professionals evacuated the school room by room. They had to identify themselves as agents at each closed door. Caitlin didn't want to leave the bathroom until she made sure that she and her students were no longer in danger. Once the institution was empty, the agents searched each sector again. They believed there could be other shooters outside the school. The injured were treated by doctors from Danbury Hospital. 2 children and an adult had to be taken directly to the hospital, but they could not be saved. All 3 died. The Sandy Hook massacre lasted 11 minutes but left 26 dead, 6 adults and 20 children. The media quickly echoed the shock, but also a huge unknown that began to hover over everyone. Why? The Sandy Hook massacre stunned every corner of the United States, including the upper echelons. President Barack Obama met with the relatives of the victims and participated in a vigil. In a press conference, he stated that these tragedies must end and that changes needed to be made to achieve this. Meanwhile, the superintendent of Newton Schools, Janet Robinson, decided that the students of Sandy Hook would not return to class until January. During that time, they would attend classes at a middle school. The police launched a thorough investigation. Identifying the killer and their motives was essential. Recovering the murderer's weapons, including those left in the car, posed no problems. They also reached his house and found his mother's dead body. But the next steps in the investigation were confusing and gave rise to rumors and misunderstandings. On Adam's body, they found an identification in the name of his brother, Ryan Lanza. Since he had been living in New Jersey for some time, Ryan had to undergo an interrogation by the local police, in which officers from Connecticut and Federal Bureau of Investigation agents participated. Many believed he may have been the mass murderer's accomplice. Ryan said he hadn't contacted his brother since 2010, yet spoke in detail about his mental health and odd habits. The officers also spoke with Peter, the father of the murderer. He was shocked, but did not contribute more than what Ryan had said. Only a year after the massacre, he said in an interview that he believed his younger son must suffer from something more than Asperger's. He thought it could be schizophrenia or another more serious mental disorder. On the other hand, Adam Lanza's remains were subjected to all kinds of analysis. No traces of any illegal substance were found in his blood. He also only underwent an autopsy with the aim of identifying any tumor or anomaly in the brain that would explain his behavior. But everything looked perfectly normal. In those early and intense days, the police and the Federal Bureau of Investigation clung to the most obvious evidence, the material collected from previous school shootings. The technical team managed to discover that Adam had downloaded videos of the Columbine massacre and also others where someone was taking their own life with firearms. But they couldn't find any more data. Lanza had removed the hard drive to destroy it. Perhaps there was the key to understanding his atrocities. Investigations and theories continued for months with interviews of family, neighbors, and the woman who had communicated with Lanza online. Despite this, the motive behind the young man's massacre at Sandy Hook remained unclear. They knew he had been a student there as a child, but this was still insufficient to formulate a firm hypothesis. Forensic psychiatrist James Knoll ventured a possible explanation. Lanza carried an unbearable, maddening pain and set out to transfer it to dozens of families. November 23, 2013. Connecticut authorities released a report indicating that Adam had been the only attacker and the case was closed. However, the Sandy Hook massacre would once again dominate the media, and for the most unthinkable reasons. There was no doubt that Adam Lanza had been responsible for the massacre, but someone thought differently. That someone was Alex Jones, broadcaster and owner of the far-right media InfoWars dedicated to conspiracy theories. According to Jones, the massacre at Newton School was a plot by the United States government led by Obama to take away guns from citizens. And not only that, he assured that no one had died. The words outraged the public, especially the victims' parents. In 2021, 8 of them and a Federal Bureau of Investigation agent sued Jones for $550 million. The case went to trial. The relatives told how the broadcaster's inventions had generated a tidal wave of hatred towards them. In the end, Jones was found guilty of defamation. The sentence consisted of paying the victims' relatives the sum of $965 million. The consequences of the massacre are evident and lasting, but here we all wonder, what happened to the survivors? What happened at Sandy Hook forever altered the lives of those who survived. Although they returned to school, nothing was the same for them. They couldn't sit at their desks and do their homework without feeling tense. It happened to the children, but also to the teachers and all the adults who had avoided Lanza's fury. Even so, everyone had valuable support and were able to move forward. The little ones grew up, finished elementary and high school, and entered college. However, news of other school massacres periodically bring them back to old and horrible ghosts. Some expressed in interviews the pain they feel for those who died. Some even wonder why they had the luck or misfortune to stay alive. While each case is an example of struggle, one of the symbols of survival from the Sandy Hook massacre is a teacher we already met, Catherine Roig. During the first few months she was scared, but the will to improve and therapy sessions helped her twist a fate of torment. She shared her experiences in the book Choosing Hope and was invited to give lectures and talks in schools all over the world. The demand for activities does not prevent her from reconnecting with several of the young people who were the children she protected. That sad and dark morning of December 14, 2012. The Sandy Hook massacre is considered one of the bloodiest school massacres in history. Despite everything, it did not prevent the proliferation of new massacres which still occur with a chilling frequency, especially in the United States. In 2023 alone, cases were confirmed in at least 29 states. The Newton murders revived for a time the eternal discussion about the freedom to carry firearms within the United States territory. In 2021, then-President Joe Biden tried to do something about it. He asked the Senate to approve a bill on background checks, another to keep guns out of the reach of abusers, and a third known as LAID, Build Back Better, with programs for community violence intervention. All initiatives and debates always end up in nothing. With Donald Trump back in power, it's expected that no gun control law will prosper in the coming years. In fact, on Friday, February 7, 2025, he ordered an examination of all provisions regulating the use of firearms in the United States. With no solutions in sight, there are quite a few who venture here in a matter of minutes. So that another massacre like Sandy Hook adds to a statistic as macabre as it is endless.